To Nick Sayers, who's going to come and talk about Nick Draws Nationals and Neighbours. Nick Sayers.
Hi. 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 Try again. So yeah, this is actually the last talk I gave at this very place was in January 2020. It was my last public talk before the pandemic. Anyway, so here I am. So I'm an artist, and before the pandemic I worked in schools and science events and all over the world making art to do with science. So this is a giant drawing machine that you can use to trace around a body at one end, and you get like a little miniature drawing at the other end. It's a giant sketchograph that I used to have when I was a kid. These are people, like kids at the school, where I'm teaching them how to make pinhole cameras. And these are sort of long, like 6-month exposure photographs that I shoot, and they shot some around their school. And then this is like a suitcase-sized bicycle spirograph drawing machine that I made to go to South Korea, and again this was my last foreign trip before the pandemic. In fact, it's my last foreign trip anywhere. I've mostly been in Brighton for the last 2.5 years. And then this happened. So, you know, schools, science festivals, work abroad, all got killed by this thing. This is a view near where I live in Portslade, on the edge of Brighton. On a sort of what would normally be quite a busy day, and I actually quite like the sort of spookiness of lockdown, and how suddenly there was so little traffic noise and you could hear birds singing, but it felt like a sort of momentous moment in history, and I sort of felt, you know, I'd lost all my work, but I sort of felt like as a visual artist I needed to respond in some way to this moment in history. And I thought back to when I was a student at A-level and then at art school, and I used to sort of spend time in the common room when I was bunking off lessons, drawing my friends. And so these are some of my teenage mates in the common room, or down the pub. And I was trying to sort of revisit this in 2019. This was one of my foreign trips, probably one of my best ones. It was teaching origami to Italian pensioners on a cruise ship going from Dubai to Mumbai. I drew some of the sort of entertainments, like a fashion show and like a sort of one of the bands playing. And then this guy, I sort of offered to draw his portrait. He was one of the sort of ship's entertainers in the sort of bar. I think he was actually trying to chat me up. But we had a sort of conversation while I drew him, and yeah, got to know him. It was quite nice. So with that in mind, I kind of I thought, oh, I could draw. Like, I'd only just moved to Portslade. I'd lived in Hove and Brighton for most of my time before that, and so I thought, oh, I'll get to know my neighbours. You know, we're doing nothing. So this is my next door neighbour. Really nice guy. He had throat cancer before, so that's why he's got like this little sort of black thing, which is what he used to speak through. Sounded a bit like Darth Vader, but it was a really nice guy. And we sort of, you know, this was the first one I drew, and I thought, oh, I wonder if I can get to know my street and sort of talk to people about this time in history. So I sort of set the rules, like I'd draw people from 2 meters away. I could wear a mask if they wanted, and we'd just sort of sit and talk on their front doorstep, and I'd draw them and sort of write a story about their time during lockdown. And it was really nice. I mean, I live on a sort of 1930s terrace, so part of the original idea was actually going to be that each one was going to be framed by these doorways. That didn't quite happen, but it gave a sort of slight sort of regularity to the pictures that I drew. And another sort of like choice I made early on was it was the first implement I took out my pencil case, was a biro, but actually really liked that it sort of stopped me from faffing around too much. Like, I couldn't draw something in pencil and go, oh, it's not quite right. So I sort of had to commit to a line, and also in a funny sort of way, talking sort of took my mind off the drawing. So I made sort of quite sort of unconscious marks, which was, yeah, sort of actually helped the drawing in a strange sort of way. So this is one of the, I sort of drew single people and couples. This was one of the loveliest. This was this couple, they just got together and they were the only couple that I drew that were holding hands the whole time. And she worked in the NHS and he was a mortician. And she was actually more chatty. And I was like, no, what do you do? So he was telling me all that his sort of strange life growing up in a family of morticians and dealing with dead bodies in his family home. So yeah, I'd write these little stories that went with the Instagram. I sort of designed it almost for Instagram, really. So the sort of, I like to think that it was a sort of both a drawn portrait and a written one. So I started doing it for free, but then I thought, well, I'm not actually earning any money now, so I sort of started taking donations, and I gave 10% to NHS charities together. I again sort of started off like with the neighbours that I'd already met. Then I sort of started chatting people up on the street. Then I basically I got to the end of those, and then I started sort of flyering and sort of like cold calling on doors. Yeah, as the sort of eccentric artist, door-to-door portraitist. So it was quite an interesting experience. And then also being a massive geek, I set about spreadsheeting the shit out of it. So these are the people that I've drawn. Hang on. Oh, I forgot I had a pointer here. So yeah, so these are, I actually drew 30 people, but I drew 31, but one of them didn't want to be published. So there's a sort of unpublished one. And then this is all the statuses of the, like, green is drawn, red is not interested, yellow is unsure, yeah, so forth. And I got sort of male, female, and age ranges and all sorts of stuff, which came in handy later on. So, so this is just a sample. This is a guy who turned out to be a optical neuroscientist. So we had a lot of geeky science stuff in common to talk about. So that was a really nice meeting, and he's become one of my friends actually through this project. And this is a next door neighbour, but one. Who's in his 80s, absolutely fit as a fiddle, yeah, he'd grown up on the street. In fact, he was born in 1938, which was when the house were built, and he remembers going into my cellar because he had a friend there, and they used them as air raid shelters in the war, and also there's a lot of fruit trees on the street, and it turns out those were sort of like a market garden during the war. So it was really interesting sort of hearing about local history and the sort of history of the street as well. This is the 30 whatever it was, 30 something drawings that I did. I'm sorry, being a bit funny because it was those singles and couples as well. So, so this is the first one I drew, my neighbour. This is my daughter, who is my second willing accomplice, and then this is the most recent one, which was an artist at the top there, and you can see my drawing sort of improved a little bit, so it's more sketchy at the start and sort of got more details as I went on. And also I sort of felt like I'd sort of meet someone at one point whose views are really objectionable or boring, but it turns out everyone's favourite topic is themselves. So I drew 30 of the 96 houses on my street, and then good old Boris announced a second lockdown in the winter, and I don't know about you, but like I found the summer lockdown actually quite enjoyable, but the winter one not so much. So I thought, well, it's too cold to sit on the street drawing people, so I'll try drawing people via Zoom. It seems to be this new thing, and so I drew my friend over the other end of town. I thought, oh, I could draw someone in the other end of town, or London, or Manchester, or Edinburgh, or France, or any of the 197 countries in the world. So I sort of set myself the challenge of, and because I've been quite well travelled, I'd sort of met people, here's me, looking very smug, in Azerbaijan, with a whole host of different people from different countries. So I thought I'll sort of hit them up for a portrait and get to sort of reconnect in this time when we can't actually travel in real life. So this is a guy I drew in Egypt, and here are a few people I've drawn like in Iraq, Marshall Islands, Croatia, Bhutan. This one here was surprisingly sort of not appearing, like often the first time I meet these people was when they turn the camera on, so I was expecting her to appear in a burqa. She was actually very sort of cosmopolitan, an artist, with pictures of like paintings of naked ladies on the wall, and like a Kurdish daff drum. These guys in the Marshall Islands, one of these turned out to be the fourth in line to be the king of the Marshall Islands. Croatia, that had not just the pandemic, but 2 or possibly 3 major earthquakes during lockdown. So she was like woken at night when her building was shaking, and a few hundred people died and were injured during that time. So sort of countries dealing with other issues apart from the pandemic. This guy in Bhutan was a tour guide, but also a very devout Buddhist monk, and Buddhist rather. So this is his shrine, and he showed me around his this sort of hillside monastery, the bathhouse that he lived next to. It was probably my longest portrait session with it. It was about 5 hours, that one, but mostly just him showing me around. As well as having drawn all these countries, I've got a self-portrait in each one because of the whole Zoom format. So you can see the sort of, I drew a beard in lockdown. I sort of reconfigured my entire bedroom and office. You can actually see the toilet in one of them down the hall. Various sort of different sort of camera kit and stuff like that sort of appeared and disappeared on my back door there. And then, so this is where I got to 100. So this is 100 countries. Started off with Philippines down there, sorry, and Slovenia up here. And these first 30 or so were people I've met in real life, and then it's got more and more obscure as I've gone on, and now it's kind of like friends of friends of friends. And whenever I meet someone with an interesting accent or a different skin tone, I sort of go, "So where are you from? Do you have friends in I don't know, Armenia or wherever?" Here's again, being a geek, I've Google mapped this, so these are all the countries I've drawn so far. You can see various little gaps as well. Like for America, I tried to draw one person for each time zone. I was going to try and do that for Russia as well, but I've only drawn one so far. I've interestingly drawn Russia and Ukraine before the war broke out, so I've sort of kept tabs with them. Australia, I was going to do each different states. And also you can sort of see the whole of the Sahara is kind of empty. That's where I'm at. So the Neighbours project, I raised money for NHS Charities Together. For this, I'm also taking donations depending on the sort of wealth of the country that I'm drawing. And I'm giving 10% to Médecins Sans Frontières, which is or Doctors Without Borders, which, as you probably know, is a medical humanitarian organisation working in conflict zones and natural disasters around the world. I've said that 100 and something times now. It seemed like an appropriate cause for this. So I've drawn over 100 countries now, of the 197 on my list. But that number, that's like the UN list plus 4, which I'll tell you about sorry, I'm running out of time. But it's a bit too close to 200, so my stretch goal is to draw someone from the Svalbard International Seed Bank in the Arctic Circle, someone from Antarctica, and I've actually drawn someone who was working there during the pandemic now, and the International Space Station. So there's my stretch goals. I'd really like to have a book published of this one day, both the stories and the drawings, an exhibition. In fact, during Brighton Fringe this year, I teamed up with shops and cafes around Brighton that related to the countries that I've drawn. And I made these, being also a graphic designer, I made these sort of posters with the portrait and the story on it to go in the window. So these are the countries I have left. So there's I think 82 countries left. Don't be confused. Don't be distracted by the fact there's the United Kingdom on there. I'm thinking of either drawing a self-portrait or drawing a very sort of English gent friend that I have. So that's going to happen. But yeah, if you know anyone in these countries, get in touch because yeah, it's slowing down now because I'm getting to the more obscure ones. Thank you very much.
Yeah.